S.A. Gilari Window Cleaning proudly sponsors Noontime History, the show, making dirty windows a thing of the past.
Hello and welcome to another Noontime History, the show. And what is the best way to describe the show? Well, it's like a magazine show. It's got a bit of everything. So what have we got in store for you today? Of course, we have the regular features, Where Is This? And also a glimpse into the past and some amazing historical facts. We also have our main feature, and today's topic is the Eastgate tragedy. So if you haven't already, pour yourself a brew and let's get ready for Noontime History, the show! Well, let me first thank you for joining us again for another chapter of this show, the show that brings your local history direct to your screen. Without further ado, I want to bring on the first feature, Where Is This? I suppose I could help you, but that would be kind of cheating, wouldn't it? If you do know the answer, shout it out, or failing that, you can always leave your answer in the messages or the comments below. So you will often hear me proudly tell people that the area I'm born has 2,000 years worth of history, and maybe more if you include the Celtic tribes. Unfortunately, we don't know much about the Celtic tribes in our area because there just isn't enough evidence. Thankfully, the same cannot be said about our recent history. For the past couple of hundred years, we have the media which has been recording events and archiving that information for our benefit. Through this archive, we are able to get a clear picture to our recent history. History that could have been lost through time. We have just mentioned the Celtic tribes and the fact that we know so little about them. But imagine what we could have learned from them if they had a media system like ours. With our archives, we can look back to any given day 100 years ago and pretty much know what was happening at that specific time, within reason. The beautiful thing about having access to our archives is that we can also use the information to remind us what we have lost in the past. To show you what I mean, it's time for a glimpse into the past. Here in Bourne, we like to build lots and lots of houses. And there's no exception down this street in a very old part of Bourne. Down this part of Eastgate stood Jack Lovell's garage, Riverside Motors. It was probably called this because of the river that runs parallel with the street. It had a pump on a little forecourt, and within the building itself was a garage to mend automobiles. It wasn't the prettiest of buildings. In fact, it looked like something one would find on a campsite. The building opened in 1959. Hanging inside the garage was an item from the previous building, and this old battered sign bared the name of the previous building, which Jack had visited when he was a little lad under the most unusual of circumstances. As one can see from the name, Butcher's Arms, the building previous to the garage was a public house. It was run by the Lappage family from 1931 to 1941. The building was early 19th century and made of brick. It was a popular drinking house for both the local farmers and the men working at the Hereward labour camp. I mentioned the year 1941 because this was the year when the building was demolished. Now, unlike Jack's garage, which was torn down and flattened by bulldozers for the housing developments, like most buildings in Bourne, the Butcher's Arms was never demolished. Well, not in the way one would imagine anyway. What happened to the Butcher's Arms? Well, you'll have to wait and see, so keep watching. I just want to remind you that if you have any stories or old photographs that you would like to share, then please get in touch. We would love to hear from you. In fact, we do have something to show you from an email that we were sent, and we were sent this picture. This is the old crossing at Billingborough, on the dual bend in between Sempringham and Billingborough. This line ran from Bourne to Billingborough, which closed in the early 60s to goods trains. This is what the area looks like today. It looks wholly different. There were many gatehouses which were dotted along the line and a few stations. To name them, we had Dyke, Morton, Rippingale and Billingborough. The railway ran behind Ancaster Road in Bourne. One can still see the old embankment behind the secondary school, which is now a public footpath. And if there's anyone local watching this, then you'll also remember it as the Old Cross Country Path for PE. There were also two bridges, one at this point on Manning Road and another at this point on Abbey Road. This picture here shows the Abbey Road Bridge as it was being taken down. Notice the Abbey School in the distance, and that the bridge was where the school car park is now. It didn't take long for the demolition of the bridge. It's a shame they did remove it, because imagine if they did keep it. This bridge is a direct link from the school to the Abbey lawns with the outdoor swimming pools and the playing fields and the church. Today the school children have to cross a busy road to get to these destinations. Another reason they should have kept it is quite simply it adds character to our town. In fact, imagine if we still had this bridge. It could have been part of a greater cycle route. Something that seems to be growing in popularity in Bourne, especially with the new event that will be coming our way in the summer. In fact, this is something we're going to be discussing in our next show, because right now it's time for our main feature. When we think of Bourne, we would probably describe it as a quiet market town. It would be fair to say then that if something out of the norm was to happen to this town, the event would quick become big news. And no news in Bourne gets bigger than a plane falling out of the sky. And not just falling out of the sky, I mean getting shot out of the sky. And there was such an event, as hard as that is to believe. I think it would be safe to assume we all know what was happening in Europe during the years 1939 and 1945. England was at war with Germany. Bourne, like many other towns in the area, was a safe haven for the children of London, Manchester, Sheffield and other targeted areas who were sent to the countryside to escape the bombings. But even this quiet market town could not escape a war that was constantly being fought all around them. And it was only a matter of time before tragedy was set to strike. At 8 minutes before midnight on Sunday, 4th of May 1941, the war had literally landed on the town of Bourne's doorstep as a German aircraft was shot down by a RAF Bristol Beaufighter. During the fight, the Junker released incendiary bombs over the town. Thankfully, the damage was minimal. The actual fight supposed to have lasted only a few minutes when the Bristol Beaufighter was finally successful in accurately hitting the German aircraft, injuring the pilot. The aircraft, without a pilot, nosedived and was travelling at great speed. The main body of the aircraft ablaze. Moments later, it had taken out the Butcher's Arms in Eastgate, leaving 10 dead and 6 wounded. A truly dark day in Bourne's history. The sound of it crashing into the ground would be something that no witness would ever forget. Although it would appear from a statement from Les Jackson, who was on duty fire watching that night, not all of Bourne heard it, especially not the inspector at the police station in North Street, who didn't seem to believe his story after he had rushed without stopping to inform them of the incident. For Les, this was his real taste of war, and he remembered that night in every detail. He said that the aircraft seemed to be coming from the coast, and it sounded like a British plane, but then the cannons opened fire and bits of fuselage started falling around them. It was much too dark to see properly, but he realised by the sound that the plane was in trouble, because what he could see in the darkness, the engine appeared to be up and down like a yo-yo. He said that it was a very nasty experience. He recalled there being bodies all over the place. He couldn't believe that the plane had sliced the butcher's arms completely away from the row of houses, as clean as a whistle, like it had been purposely done by a builder. The aircraft had gone straight through the building, and the engine had gone right into the ground for about 25 feet, covering the street with some sort of green de-icing chemical, and the smell from it was absolutely terrible. In one night, 10 lives were taken, and the Butcher's Arms was completely destroyed. The people killed in this tragedy was landlord Charles Lappage and his wife Fanny Elizabeth. Their two relatives, Mrs. Lappage's sister, Mrs. Minnie Gertrude Cooper, and her daughter, Mrs. Violet Jackson. 3 British soldiers, Lieutenant Harold Schofield, Private Harrison McLean, and Private Clifford James. The German crewmen who were killed were pilot Adam Becker, radio operator and observer Carl J. Fock. Rear gunner Rudolph survived it by parachuting out of the plane, and he was slightly injured, but he gave himself up after hiding his gun down a passageway near Bulldog's Mill. The army picked him up the next day and took him away as prisoner of war. Engineer experts arrived quite promptly the next day and removed what they could of the German aircraft. But they did not recover everything, as the practice was to take what you could and bury the rest. It is believed by locals at the time that parts of the engine, the wings and the fuselage are still there to be found at the bottom of the Bourne O. In fact, in August 1964, when Jack Lovell was expanding his motor business, he had uncovered more than he had bargained for. The contractor, Derek Bauer, had unearthed almost 8 feet with his bucket from his digger. What he had struck was a 1,100-pound bomb, which no doubt would have been used on the munitions factory in Grantham had the junker reached its destination. This tragedy, which happened in Bourne in the early stages of World War II, is a stark reminder that although the front line may have been hundreds of miles away to the east, in reality there was no real place that was safe from the horrors of this war, and that included the small, quiet town of Bourne. Wow, what an unbelievable story. And I say unbelievable because unless you were told this story, there is no physical reminder anywhere in Bourne of this tragic event. But I have to say that it isn't without the want of trying. There have been campaigns in the past to have some kind of plaque dedicated to this event in our history, but regrettably to no avail, which is a real shame. But again, this lack of recognition in the form of monuments and statues seems to be a running theme in Bourne. But it doesn't have to be like this. Right now, we can make a change. Right now, the council can get involved and make sure Bourne's history gets the recognition it deserves by creating a programme prioritising monuments and statues and display boards for events like the Eastgate tragedy. Let me know what you think. Should Bourne have something in town, a statue or a monument of some kind, to remember this tragic night which happened at 8 minutes to midnight, 4th of May, 1941. The night a plane was shot out of the sky and scarred Bourne with the reality of war. Here is another peek at Where Is This? This one might have you scratching your head, but if you do know the answer, then write it in the comments below. Now, here is an interesting fact that is in relation to the Eastgate tragedy. Did you know that the fight between the junker and the Beaufighter didn't actually start in the above the skies of Bourne? It actually started all the way back at Hull, up north. Well, I'm afraid to say it's that time again where we must draw the show to a close. But fear not, because there'll be another show coming your way very soon, filled with all the fantastic content which is now to be expected from Noontime History, the show. Before we go, I think it's time we revealed the answer to the game of Where Is This? And the answer is... Did you get it right? Well, if not, you'll get another chance to play again on the Noontime Facebook page, which we feature weekly. I just want to remind you that this show is all about giving you a taster of our history in Bourne. We really only scrape the surface, and if you want to delve further, then I strongly recommend Rex Needle's A Portrait of Bourne, which can be found at the Heritage Centre in Bourne. Also, I strongly recommend that you visit the Heritage Centre, which is open Saturday and Sunday 2 till 4. Well, I hope this show has been enjoyable, informative, as well as entertaining. If you have any stories or photographs that you would like to share them, please feel free to private message me. All the details that you will need will be on the Facebook page. But from me and the rest of the Noontime team, it's ciao for now.